Hello there everybody, Rockrage here with the very first tutorial in my series of how to use the various tools I use in Garry's mod. In today's tutorial, we're going to be going over the Ragdoll Mover tool. Basically, this add-on is a more advanced ragdoll posing tool, which can actually allow you to make more complex poses than the Fizz gun could ever allow. Keep in mind, some ragdolls like Marie from the Squid sisters are not compatible with this add-on. And it will break the game, so you'll have to end up restarting if you end up trying to do it with any ragdolls that are incompatible. But, onto the tutorial itself for the ragdolls that are compatible, which is a majority of them on the workshop. Now, basically, if you left-click on the ragdoll on the various bones, like for example, the first bone I'm going to select is the hip bone. This allows me to actually move the ragdoll around because it's the root bone of the ragdoll itself. This can have any different number of names, but for the Inkling ragdolls, it's going to be the hip tool. Now, the ragdoll mover has two basic functions: the angle gizmo and the position gizmo. This is the position gizmo with the arrows. The angle gizmo is the one which allows you to rotate the ragdoll around. Now, the green arrow allows you to move it forwards and backwards. The red arrow allows you to move it left and right. And the blue arrow allows you to move it up and down. Now keep in mind, this works for any bone, not just the hip bone. Although, it won't work in every single case. And there are combinations of various areas which allow you to move it a little more easier. In other words, it combines two of the functions of the angle. Now, moving on to the rest of it, after I pose this ragdoll here again. Now I'm going to be showing you the position gizmo. Or rather, the angle gizmo. I'm sorry, this is completely unscripted. Anyways, moving on to how the angle gizmo works. The angle gizmo allows you to rotate the ragdoll forwards and backwards, left and right, and up and down. If that even makes sense. And you'll see how it works in this tool here. I'm going to select the head on the head bone for now. Now for this portion, I'm going to be showing you how the angle tool works. For this one, I'm going to have the discs fully visible because it makes it easier for me to see where I'm editing. But if it confuses you too much, then you can turn it off. The red disc allows you to move it on an axis that has a horizontal plane. The blue line allows you to manipulate it in a way that actually allows you to rotate it up and down. And as for the green disc, it allows you to move it from side to side. And those are the various functions of how the angle tool works in the ragdoll mover. Now, before I move on to the next portion of the tutorial, which is going to be talking about the IK chains, allow me to show you what the localized position gizmo does, if you have it turned on. Now, if you check Localized Position Gizmo, this changes the direction that the arrows are facing depending on how the bone is where the bone is located and how it's posed. It doesn't change how the tool functions though, so you don't need to worry about it being any different aside from just having it be a little more accurate to how the bone is positioned. Now, as for what scaling does, this changes the size of both the position and the angle gizmos, making it a little easier to edit if you can't deal with the smaller sizes. I usually have mine set at 10 though, just because it makes it a little more easier for me to work with. Now, moving on to the next to last portion of the Ragdoll Mover tutorial. My favorite function of all time is going to be the IK chains. Now, as for what Unfreeze Bones does, I'll be covering that shortly after the IK chains. Now, in order to have the IK chains function work, you're going to want to pull out the Rag Mover IK chains tool. But before I go into that, allow me to spawn in a ragdoll that already has the IK chains feature pre-installed. Anything that uses the Valve Source engine should work with this, but some custom ragdolls also have this feature enabled by default. Basically, what the IK chains do is they allow you to manipulate the ragdoll without having the arms and legs move around, making it very useful for posing if you want precision. However, in the case of the ragdolls like the Inklings, I'm going to have to install those by hand. So, in order to do that, I'm going to want to pull out the Rag Mover IK Chains tool. And essentially how I do this is that there's four functions. Left leg, right leg, left hand, and right hand. You're going to want to make sure you select each of these properly. And keep in mind, the Ragdoll mover only works with certain areas that only have 3 bones. From the first leg bone to the foot bone. And from the first arm bone to the hand bone. Any ragdolls that have more than these amount of bones will not be compatible with this tool. So, you might want to keep that in mind if you're editing with a ragdoll that has more than 3 bones in their arms and legs. Now, you're going to want to make sure that you have these boxes checked if you want to manipulate the ragdoll in this way. But as you can see, by adding these, I can now manipulate the Inkling ragdoll and not have the hands and feet move. This can make it very useful for posing and even animating as well, because it allows for better precision and it helps the tool lag less. Now, moving on to the very last portion of this tutorial. If you want to have the IK chains no longer function, then just uncheck each box. And if you want to edit a specific bone in particular, just keep that box checked. Now, moving on to the very last function that the Ragdoll Mover tool even has. The unfreeze on release portion of it. I don't have any clue on what the tool update release thing does, but essentially, if you have this box unchecked, it'll allow you to freeze bones that were previously unfrozen. But if the bone is still if you have it checked, then the bone will become unfrozen when it's deselected. And that pretty much covers the entirety of the tool. I'm sorry that this didn't go into as much detail as you'd probably hoped it would, but I tried to explain the tool as best as I possibly could. Now, I'm going to be moving on to a time lapse, which shows me using the tool effectively and how much easier it can make than using the fizz gun alone. So, I'll see you all in the time lapse.